This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian. Hey there, thanks for being here. I'm back with another episode, and in this episode, we're talking to Heidi Thompson of Evolve Your Wedding Business. Now, this episode is not just for folks in the wedding business. It really can apply to whatever business you run because we're talking about marketing. Heidi and I just have a really fun conversation talking about marketing and just getting really nerdy with the whole thing. We talk about how we can better attract the types of clients we actually want to serve. We talk about how to be more intentional and efficient with the types of platforms and tools that we utilize to market our services and our products. And we dive into a whole conversation about Facebook ads. Heidi has spent a lot of time digging into Facebook ads and figuring out kind of the best practices behind all of that. And so she shares some of her top tips with us. Now, if you want to get to know Heidi a little bit better, I'm actually joining forces with her, and we are planning a webinar coming up soon. So you can learn more about that and sign up and save your spot over at AnnetteStepanian.com/free webinars. With that said, let's head on over to that conversation. Hi, Heidi. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Heidi, you are a self-proclaimed marketing nerd guru. We have had the pleasure of connecting both online and offline, and you are just one of those people who loves this stuff. Like, you just love the psychology behind it, and you just love digging into it, which is why I love talking to you so much. But before we go into kind of all of your best tips and whatnot, why don't you bring our listeners up to speed on kind of just how you got to where you are today?
Okay, so I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. So like you just found out recently, which I think is funny to me because you're a lawyer, and you didn't know this about me, but I came like super close to going to law school, like started applying.
Really?
Took my LSAT, started applying, and I was like, no, I don't want to do this.
That's okay. Oh yeah,
Which,
once you pass that LSAT hurdle, so that's impressive, okay?
Yeah, I went through all that. I just met too many really horrible lawyers. And it's like, I don't want that life. That lifestyle looks rough.
Yeah.
So I'm good. I'll go do something else. So after college, I was working in some nonprofits. I thought I wanted to go the nonprofit route, like work in NGOs. And I started doing events for them. I started doing fundraising events of all different kinds. And I got really into it and I really loved it. And at first, I thought it was the event side of things. So that's what really drew me into the wedding industry way back when. And then I had worked as a wedding planner's assistant, realized, love you wedding planners, but this is too high stress for me.
And like being an ER doctor sometimes, because like you just want to be on your feet and like ready to go.
And it was like, oh, wait a minute. It's actually the marketing piece. And I didn't recognize it because I didn't study marketing in school. I studied political science. I was going to go to law school. I was going to work in DC. And I was like, oh, okay, I really am into this whole marketing thing. So I started working, over a span of years in digital marketing for all sorts of different companies. I moved to England. I worked for a tech startup there in London. I worked for the University of Cambridge in their marketing department. And all this time, I'm still keeping a pulse on the wedding industry because I freaking love it. And I just see this huge gap. And it's that what the media, at least in the UK at the time, was doing versus what people actually wanted. And as a marketing geek, I see this as a huge gap and an opportunity. So what was happening in wedding media was very white and fluffy and ethereal. And what was really happening for people who were getting married was very much the offbeat bride, rock and roll bride. I'm going to do something that really embodies who I am kind of thing. So I actually started a wedding fair to connect those people to the vendors who were, oh my God, some of the most talented people I've ever met in my life. I'm talking dressmakers who have worked on like West End show costuming.
Cool.
Amazing skill. But I found that I was spending a lot of time coaching them on how they could get the most out of these events. And that's when I realized, if they were paid purely on their creativity and their skill, they'd be millionaires, billionaires. But that's not how the marketplace works. You're paid based on, how well you can market and get yourself out there and bring people into you. And that's where they were lacking. So that is actually when I kind of put these two worlds together and decided I needed to form this business to support this industry.
Nice. Totally random thought, but I actually got married abroad in Europe, and I was very intrigued by the fact that the wedding industry there is not what it is like here in the United States.
No.
In terms of like how commercial it is. So I definitely noticed that, that you just don't have the kind of fairs or just resources that we have available here. From the moment you get engaged, you're constantly being marketed to. So total side note. But
yeah, it is interesting. It's odd because we think of our countries and our markets as being relatively similar as Western countries, but they're not.
Yeah. And I don't know which one is better. Honestly, I would have to say there's something to the fact that in Europe, there's this simplicity to the process of getting married that I appreciated. But then it's so fun out here in the US because you get to try on all these dresses and do all these fun things.
Yeah.
So I was a total sucker for all of that stuff. I was like, babe, can we go look at engagement rings again? Or not, wedding bands. I went like a million times just because I just loved going and trying them on. And
it's fun to shop for.
It's so fun to shop for, but I digress. So about marketing, how would you define marketing? I think some people think about marketing as like social media, and obviously that's not all it is. But if you strip away all the tools that we have for marketing, how would you actually define what the role of marketing is in your business?
Marketing is interesting because it's kind of an amorphous umbrella word. Encompasses everything from, like you said, these digital tools we have to putting out flyers somewhere to talking to someone about your business to advertising. It's all marketing. And I really, really hate this phrase because it's the wrong way to go about marketing. But in a way, it's getting the word out about your business and what you do. But that's one piece of it. The other piece is then attracting those right people to you. So then you have the pieces of marketing that are like, who am I? Who do I serve? And I want to make sure that my marketing lines up to who those people are so that I'm attracting them. I mean, it's like a magnet. You have to point it in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think you're really good at that. And, the whole ideal customer avatar, I roll my eyes at it sometimes when you have to think about, my ideal customer and blah, blah, blah. But it does make sense. And when you really start looking at your business through the eyes of your ideal customer and not from what you want to do, it really does make a shift in terms of being able to attract those people. So what are some things that people can think about in developing that ideal customer? And I think it's an evolving process, but maybe you can speak to that as well.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. And I think, like you said, like those exercises where it's like, just write down these things. It's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah.
You're like, her name is Sally.
Yeah,
she likes to go to Starbucks. She reads People magazine and watches TMZ. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't give you a whole lot to go on. So what I encourage my clients to do is to actually take this to a person-to-person level. So if you don't have any clients at this point in time, if it's a brand new business, this might be a little bit more difficult. You might have to search out people a little bit more. You might have to go to people who you feel like embody that person in your personal circle. But really talking to them and asking them questions and figuring out, what do you actually care about? One of the questions I often have people ask in these things that they never think to otherwise is, well, how do you find your vendors? Well, what do you look for? What, makes you think that this is a good fit or not a good fit? And what did you think when you first saw my site and why did you contact me? And you're going to find out all of these things that are coming from their perspective that you just don't see because you aren't shopping for the same thing they are. You're not in the same headspace. And taking that and hearing it from another person is so powerful. And I do this on a fairly regular basis in my business. Anytime I'm feeling stuck or like I could go in like three different directions and I need to figure out what I'm doing, I get on a Skype call with a couple of people who maybe they're existing clients, maybe they're past clients, maybe they're people I think would make amazing clients in the future. And I ask them questions about what they are struggling with and what they're frustrated by, and figure out how I might be able to solve that problem. And hearing that in their words not only helps you see it from a different perspective, but it literally gives you the words to use to market it.
Yeah. It reminds me of those exercises. I don't know if you ever had this in college, like learn how to be an active listener.
Yeah.
Like just shut up and listen, basically, just be quiet and listen to that and don't like really, really hear them. And that requires talking to people.
Yeah. And it's so funny because the way that you describe something is almost certainly not the way they're going to describe it.
And I get that because when I'm talking about my business, it's been a process for me to break it down where I can speak lawyerly and very matter of fact, because that's what I've been trained to do. But then my audience doesn't get that just because that's not the language they speak. I have to speak in their words. So when I say, you want to protect against your liability and minimize risk, like they don't get that. They get, I really don't want to get screwed over by a nightmare client.
Right.
And that's awesome. So actually sitting down, and even on a regular basis, sitting down and talking to your ideal client is one of the tips that you would give people to better hone in on their marketing.
Yeah. And I mean, that too is a place where you're going to see it evolve. And you may love serving a client and then want to make a change in your business and realize that that's going to mean you're marketing to an entire different group of people. And that's totally fine. Like these changes happen throughout the lifespan of your business, but making sure that you are staying close to what those people actually think and what they actually say so that, you don't steamroll it with your own industry jargon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's say we have figured out our ideal client for the moment. We have figured out kind of their worries, their concerns, all that good stuff. So then what do we do? How do we go about marketing in a way that feels authentic to us, but doesn't also overwhelm us?
I think a big piece of the authentic part, like you said, is realizing that you don't have to sound like a corporation. And that you can take on any voice that you want in your business. I suggest it's your actual voice. But, it's kind of weird to keep up a character, but it can be a projection of yourself in some way. I mean, of course, you don't want to air all your dirty laundry. But the simple fact is that, like, we do business with people that we know, like, and trust. It's really hard to want to hire someone when you don't know who they are. You just have this like corporate entity or this logo that you're interacting with, whether it be on social media or an email. Like they're not coming across as an actual whole fallible human being. It's really hard to build a connection, and our brains were not built for this. I mean, we evolved to connect with people and to have, one-on-one connections with people. So making sure that you're bringing yourself down from that high level of, just wanting to make yourself sound quote unquote professional, but really what you're making yourself sound like is not a person. Mm-hmm. And making it conversational, making it so that everything you're putting out, whether it's a blog post or a social media post, it is in that tone that it speaks to what you know your people care about. Because if you're marketing by writing blog posts about, like you said, like liability, like they don't care about that. They're not going to read that blog post. But they'll read a blog post about a story where someone got totally screwed over by a nightmare client because they can relate to that.
Yeah.
So I think relatability is huge.
Yeah. And I think the point about that casual factor, that's something that I've come to recognize as well, is that as the technology has given us the ability to be more casual and informal. So you think Facebook Live, Periscope, you think of Insta stores, like all these factors where you don't have to have, perfect lighting and all that stuff. Like there's this casualness to it now that I know for me has been a process, because I, came from a world that was very formal and very professional and very prepared, and just making that transition to, I just see that progression. That's my point. As the way communications are evolving, it's becoming more and more casual, quick sound bites versus here is my epic essay on, why I think you should have contracts.
And I see that sometimes on people's about pages, like they still convey this, I work at a high level investment firm tone. And it's like, people aren't going to read that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it depends on your market, right? And your ideal client.
True. Everything does.
Some people might. Okay, great. So I still want to know, though, like, there's just such a buffet of options nowadays. And I think some people feel like they have to scramble and, we kind of want to feel like we have to be everywhere, but we realize we don't have to, as long as we really build up on one channel or one form of communication or something, one form of marketing. That's really where the power lies. So what kind of advice do you have for people who want to market themselves? They figured out their position, they figured out their value, their ideal client, but they just don't know how to get the message out in a very efficient and effective manner.
Okay, I get it. Like, it is overwhelming because you have so many choices, which is great on one hand, but on the other hand, it's paralyzing because you think, okay, I have to do all these different things, and like that could be several full-time jobs.
Yeah.
Just doing all those things, So I really like to think about it in terms of your goals and working backwards from that. So if your goal is to get a certain amount of clients, what's the step that has to happen before that? If it's they have to be on your email list, they have to schedule a one-on-one discovery call with you. Okay, what comes before that? How can I get people to the discovery call? Well, they're probably going to need to get to know you a little bit. Maybe this comes after they've read a blog post. Okay, so we know creating content is important to get people to your site, to get to know you a little bit, to be able to decide that they want to have one of those calls. And then when it comes to social media, there are so many things you can do, and it really depends where your ideal client is. And I think that's really important to consider. I see a lot of people spending time on networks that their clients aren't there. Like they're wedding vendors and they're spending time on like Google Plus and LinkedIn. Like that's not that's, the worst thing in the world to do, but we have to get really, really selective with how we spend our time. And that's probably not the best place to spend it. But finding out what works best for you, there's an element of testing to it. And there's no shame in dropping something if it's not working for you. So if you start off with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter isn't doing anything for you, you don't have to keep doing it just because you have done it in the past. It's not a bad thing to just say, you know what? Not going to do that anymore. I'm going to double down on what's working for me. Maybe that's Instagram for you. But that comes with paying attention to what is working for you and knowing that pattern that I just went through of how you get to your goal. So which of these networks are driving the most traffic to your blog posts? Which blog posts then turn into these consultation, the discovery calls with you? And how many of those actually turn into clients? And when you look at it as a system that has multiple parts like that, it's really easy to see the weak links and just cut them off.
And it makes it less personal in some weird way because you're like, well, the numbers are speaking for themselves.
Right.
So
right.
You're like,
I don't have to make
Twitter.
a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're setting these like benchmarks or these performance measures that you can just say, if it's this channel is not achieving this goal, then I can just cut it off and focus on these things. So how can people start determining what those goals should be in their business? Because maybe it's not as obvious as, oh, this person becomes a client. Maybe because in terms of the customer journey or the customer evolution, they have to go through maybe a few not hurdles, but they have to go through a few steps until they become a customer. And you don't want to cut off that pipeline a little too prematurely.
Mm-hmm. So, I want to dig more into what you have in mind. It sounds like you might have a specific instance in mind.
Kind of. I'm just thinking about, for instance, for me, or for other businesses as well, there's a bit of a customer education journey that needs to happen.
Uh-huh.
That might take a while.
Yeah.
They may come on my site and they may not be ready. They're not in need. They don't have a problem that I can solve for them, but they are still in that kind of exploratory educational phase. And I don't want to say, I want to keep that line of communication open so that when they are ready, they can come to me. And so I guess I'm trying to determine at what point how do you determine what kind of a goal you should be focusing on? Maybe that's too vague of a question, but.
Well, no, I see what you're saying. And it depends on your business. So for your business, for instance, Annette, I imagine a lot of those numbers are driven by people who come to your site and then sign up to your email list. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So then the step before that, when we're talking about social media, yes, social media can be used as a keep in touch strategy, not as effective as email. But when we're talking about pushing traffic to blog posts that then get them onto your email list, I would look at the numbers there. So where are people clicking? Are they just not clicking on stuff in one place? And maybe that is the place that if you don't want to completely cut off, just spend less time there. But I'm a big fan of doubling down on what's working. Mm-hmm. So if you are getting a lot of traffic from one source and you are getting a lot of email subscriptions from that one source, double down. Mm-hmm. Because it's working. Mm-hmm. And that's like the case with Facebook ads. I think a lot of people are afraid to up their budget on Facebook ads. But if you're paying $2 a lead and those leads are converting, double down.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Facebook ads, because I know this has become an area of expertise for you, and you've just, in your true marketing nerd guru fashion, you have studied it and analyzed all the numbers. And I think there's obviously a lot of value in driving or using Facebook ads to drive traffic to whatever offer you might be giving. So what are some of the suggestions for people maybe who haven't used Facebook ads before? How can they determine if this is the time that they should be investing in Facebook ads?
I wouldn't recommend anyone do Facebook ads unless they have an email list.
Okay.
Because what people tend to do in that instance, because they don't really have many other choices, is to just send people to their homepage. Now, if you want to get more ninja about it, what you can do is you can build out like an entire sales funnel with Facebook ads. Like if someone went to a specific blog post, you could then show them an ad for the next most relevant blog post. But if we're just talking like super simple here, have some email marketing tool that you use so that you can get people onto your list. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay to reach them over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just this idea of like, okay, you're paying to get a lead. And so what are some best practices that you've discovered with all your research that you've done? Maybe what are some like 2 or 3 best practices that people can utilize when they're getting ready to use Facebook ads?
Yeah, so I recommend starting, of course, like I said before, with your goal. So is your goal to get clients out of this? Well, then you can't just drop people on your work with me page because that's totally inappropriate for the amount of trust that you've built with them at this point. It's like proposing marriage on the first date. Probably not going to go well.
Okay, so I like this. So what would you recommend? I mean, because so you feel like going to the work with me page is like the, please marry me or let's make out. Yeah.
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 So if you think about it along those lines, it's like, okay, then we need to have a first date. So the first date can be, in the case of email marketing, whatever your opt-in offer is. Your download, maybe it's a checklist, maybe it's a swipe file, maybe it's a guide of some sort. But that is your first date. That allows you to establish some trust and to position yourself as an expert and knowing what you're talking about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Don't lose your train of thought. Do you think borrowing a strategy from people who are in the product space, do you think offering a discount as your opt-in is like a, hey, first date, or is it a, hey, let's make out?
I think it's a, hey, let's make out, unless it has to do with the targeting. These are people who have no idea who you are. Yeah. If these are people who have been to your work with me page or your product page, then I could see that.
Because they're warmer. It's a warmer audience. So yeah, because I like to think about it as, who am I talking to, right? And I always forget that. Like, is this a cold audience where they don't know me? They don't know who I am. They can't even pronounce my name. Or is it a warmer audience who's been in touch with me? And so the conversation is different. And the cool thing about Facebook ads is you can get all of that data. Like, you can design it so you know who you're talking to.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can target people who went to a specific product page on your site.
Yeah, which is why when you go and you check out that, like, I don't know, bag from Kate Spade or something, and then like you go to Facebook, it like pops up on the right-hand side. You're like, the internet is creepy. Anyway, totally interrupted. But so going back to your original train of thought about.
Yeah, so definitely starting with that thinking through the customer journey. So how does this connect? I see Facebook ads, at least in the most basic sense, as being top of the funnel. So this is getting people into your world, or it's getting people who have been to your site back into your world. So it's still very much an introduction to you, who you are, what you offer, and your content. And of course, there are ways to use it, like we said, where you've already been looking at products. There are a million different ways to use Facebook ads, but thinking through where the customer is on this customer journey is incredibly important. And thinking about, like this dating scenario, you can't just drop someone on a sales page or a work with me page or a give me money page, essentially, in some way, shape, or form, if they don't have any idea who you are and what you do. Mm-hmm. But you probably don't think about it that way because you're coming from your perspective and not theirs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that totally makes sense. You got to woo me.
Yeah.
Yeah, woo me first. Okay. Okay, so let's say we're wooing. We've gone on a few dates with this person. What do those dates look like? Actually, let's take a step back. So let's say we've decided, okay, I'm going to offer you up a checklist. I'm going to woo you. I'm going to introduce myself to you. I'm going to really try and get you to like me. But what are some like tangible things that people can do once we have attracted those people to us?
So I'm really glad you asked this. I went through this entire process of studying a whole bunch of different autoresponders because I created a swipe autoresponder for my members.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. You just like tweak it slightly. But the basis of it is, from a psychological perspective, you want to give and you want to demonstrate your value. So there are a lot of ways to do that don't involve, are you ready to buy this thing yet? Hey, I noticed you didn't buy this thing yet. So one of the emails in there is telling a story that is extrapolated from a testimonial, actually, about the before and after. This person was not super certain about working with this person, and then taking them through the journey of how this all worked out for them. So you're telling the story, you're demonstrating what you have done for them without saying, look what I did for this person. You're telling their story, what they went through, the hesitations they had, what they really enjoyed about it, so that the person reading it is like, oh, yeah, okay, I get that. I felt that way. I was thinking that too. And then the call to action in that email is, if you want stationery that is, and taking some words that the customer used about how amazing it was, click here to schedule time to talk. Mm-hmm. Some of the other ones are very simply teaching. Like you said, for a lot of us, there has to be a fair amount of teaching involved. So some of that goes through, the more introductory phases. Like, let's say the person's a wedding planner. Someone who is initially getting on their list might still be in such a flurry of all of this wedding stuff that's going on and not 100% know what they're doing or how to do this. So it's very much taking them through, teaching, sending them to useful blog posts, including little things here and there. One of them includes a checklist to go along with the blog post, like simple stuff. Mm-hmm. But thinking through, I'm this person, I just got engaged, I've got 1,000,010 things on my plate, and I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Again, knowing your customer.
Yeah. What do I need to know before I'm ready to buy? And that doesn't even necessarily mean that the person will buy from you within that time period. That's why you keep doing your regular emails to your entire list. Yeah, to nurture them, because 3-6 months from now, a year from now, they might be ready, and they're going to look to the person who's been helping them and staying top of mind, as opposed to the person who's emailing them saying, why haven't you given me your money yet? I know you need me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not being that creepy salesperson all the time. Or like, I talk about, like, sometimes you sound like an infomercial. Not you, but in general, like, where you're like, buy now. Like,
yeah. But wait, there's more.
But wait, oh, and this just got added. Yeah. Or those like QVC people, like, they're always talking and reiterating that value and that value, which actually I think you could learn a lot by watching those QVC people about how to sell. It is amazing to me just how they're able to create that sense of urgency and that sense of like testimonial and validation and that sense of just, well, everybody's doing it, you got to get on. It's just, yeah.
That's a really good point. And then like they bring people on who just bought on the phone. They're like, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe I need to buy this.
Can't wait to get my mini sewing machine. I know. I actually bought one once. I was a total sucker. I bought a sewing machine that I never used. And I remember my dad at the time was like, you just totally wasted money on this. You're never going to use it. And it was so true. I never used it. So, but I actually was talking. I know I'm going in a tangent. That's okay. I was talking today. I did a Facebook Live in my group about Arthur Murray dance lessons. My husband and I just started taking these. We did like a short one, and watching how they sell was more fascinating to me than learning how to do the waltz and the foxtrot because everything is so thought out because they've been around for a long time. They've got their system down. They know how to sell to you. They bring you in, they give you a free lesson. So that's like the free opt-in, right? The lead magnet. They give you kind of a flavor. They talk about your goals. They talk about what, aspirations you have about, learning how to dance. Is it for exercise? Is it for social, purposes? Whatever. They get you to actually like write it down in this like notebook that they have so that they're getting you invested. And then before you leave, they offer you their packages and they say, well, if you sign up today, you get a discount. before, if you sign up before you leave, you're going to get a discount. And then that package that they try and get you to purchase is just a very succinct taste of what their bigger packages are. And the whole curriculum is designed not only to teach you things and to kind of get you to see progress in a very short amount of time so you get invested, but they actually make you attend different classes with different groups so you can witness what the evolution will look like if you continue to take classes with them. So if you're in the beginning program, you get to see the folks who are kind of in the really advanced classes to get you invested. My whole point is you can learn about selling and how to tailor your customer experience by your own experiences outside of what you do.
And that's so smart. Like, I'm listening, I'm like, I gotta check this out. This sounds awesome.
Yeah. And it just was so fascinating to me because I was like, they come in, they check in with you. They're constantly trying to cheer you on. Everybody's like super positive and excited. And, they try and create this feeling of like, you're a part of a family, you're part of this community, like, and that all is psychology. I am sure they have tweaked this down to a science. Even to the point that they have this thing called Arthur Murray time, where all of their clocks are set back by 5 minutes, so you are never late to an appointment. So, it's fascinating to me. And I know you have your own experience with your dentist. I remember you'd posted about once about what they do to make their customer experience so memorable so that you want to keep going back and you want to keep
I love
talking.
going to the dentist. I love it.
Do you want to share? I know we're like on a total tangent, but
yeah, no, it's fine because it's really interesting. It is all customer experience. So I live in San Diego. I live like a 10-minute drive from the border, and it's way cheaper, and you get a lot better value, really, if you go to the dentist in Tijuana. So that's what I do. And when I found this dentist originally, I contacted them, made an appointment, and they're like, well, are you walking across? Would you like us to pick you up at the border so you don't have to like deal with getting a taxi? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. And then, you get there and it's the nicest dentist office I've ever been in my life. It's really modern. It's just a very pretty, comfortable office. And they don't have like seats. They have couches. They're like, you sink into them, leather couches, because you're probably going to be there for a while. If like I was waiting for my husband to get his wisdom teeth removed, I was going to be there for a while. And you walk in and they just hand you the remote and they have Netflix on the TV and they have Wi-Fi. And so like, great. I can get some work done. I can, work on my Spanish, watching Netflix.
Oh, it's in Spanish, duh, right?
Yeah. Or it's subtitled.
Oh, like imagine watching House of Cards in Spanish.
But if you know something well enough.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But yeah, it's just, and then they drive you home. Like they take you to the pharmacy across the street to get your stuff. Like, this is great.
Yeah. And I think what we forget sometimes, I know we're talking about Facebook ads and email and all that stuff, that we forget that there are people on the other end of it.
Yes. It's so easy to do because you're just sitting there looking at your computer. And in a way, I feel like it almost makes it more difficult for us because if you think about like how you want that person to feel, how you want that one human being to experience this and how this one human being feels at the very beginning and what you need to take them through so that they're at a point where they can say, I totally need your services. Mm-hmm. It's easier if you take it down to that one person level.
Yeah, and it feels less salesy in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing more compassion into it because you really, really care about their experience and you take yourself out of it.
And it shows, like you said, you can tell that dance company has put a lot of thought into it. And like you said, they want to make you feel like family. That's probably a value that they hold internally, that when they're creating new marketing campaigns or something, they're thinking that through. Like, does this fit with how we want to make people feel?
It's all thought out. Like they even had these binders where they like customize it based on the couple and like they put like a little, I was really impressed, but also just like, it was funny because my analytical like business side was always like, oh, here comes another like touch point where they're trying to sell to us. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it was just interesting. But We totally digressed from your amazing Facebook ad tips. I don't know if at this point you want to pick up where we left off and share some of your best practices, or if you want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, that customer journey is super important. And I'm glad we went off on it because it's really the thing that underlies everything else. You can't have a successful ad campaign. You can't have successful social media campaigns unless you know the journey. Like, where are they going? Otherwise, you're just kind of yelling into the wind and nothing's happening.
Yeah, you have to lead them. And I think I've talked about this in a previous podcast episode, is that we don't really think about us as leading people. Not that we're going to like go fight a revolution or anything, but you're leading them into an experience, into a journey. And so when you have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, and you're the expert. Take them by the hand and take them through what they need because you know what they need.
Yeah.
So with Facebook ads, I think a couple of the other things that are probably underused is the pixel for one, which is magic.
Yeah.
So you just take this little snippet of code that Facebook gives you, you put it on your site, and you can show ads to people who visited your site as a whole, specific pages. And then you can also make little changes to it so you can see within your Facebook ads reports, okay, how many people who joined my email list came from this Facebook ad? Because if you're doing other ad campaigns, if you're promoting it elsewhere, it's pretty hard to tell, you know, did these people come from these Facebook ads or somewhere else? So that is awesome. And then the targeting gets often underused. So we were talking about warm and cold audiences, and I encourage my clients to play with both. So with your warm audiences, it's your email list, which you can upload, the people who have been to your website, and then you can actually exclude warm people. So if you want to exclude all of your current customers, so you're not paying to show them ads, or if you want to create a cold audience from those people, you can create a lookalike audience from your customers, people who are very, very, very similar to your existing customers. Then you can also target interests, which the term is a little bit misleading, but you can target things like in my space, which is really important, is you're engaged and for how long. The pages that people like, which, I mean, in my space, it isn't even necessarily like it could be a wedding blog, but it could be that they are huge fans of a particular brand and you just know that about your ideal client. Like maybe they're rock climbers. They're like adventurous outdoorsy types. So you can target people who like that page, who are engaged and who are within, you know, a certain radius of your zip code.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It's so amazing.
You're like, I want to talk to redheaded people between the age of like, you know, 45 and 50 who live in Kansas. You know, like it is insane. And so again, you can get so overwhelmed by it because once you really start understanding like what the tool can do, you're like, oh my God, I could do this. I could, you know, do all these crazy things. How can people, again, simplify maybe the people who are new to Facebook ads? What is like ways that we can go about keeping it very simple so we don't get just distracted by all the shiny objects?
Good question. And it is easy to. And if you get a million ideas, great, write them down. You can come back to them. You don't have to do them right now. But
I love it. You're just like, girl, like chill out.
Yeah, idea parking lot somewhere. Just park them.
I do. I have a someday list for different things. So like someday I want to read all these great articles that I keep getting emailed, but I just don't have time. And then I have a someday ideas list where like, I don't have time for this. It's going to go in my someday idea list and then revisit them. Yeah.
But for the here and now, I recommend people running one test per campaign. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you are going to run an ad that is promoting your opt-in. And you're going to run it to your cold audience that you've created based on those interests. You're going to run it to the warm audience. You can do a variation on that. So what I mean by variation is the exact same ad with either a different image or different copy, but not both. One test at a time. And I did this recently And it's so funny because I created this Facebook course and it's like I knew all this stuff already, but I totally saw it popping up in my own ads. And for my warm audience, the ad with my face on it was getting much cheaper conversions and much more conversions. Cool. Just turn off the other one. And for the cold audience, the opposite was true.
Yeah.
I was like, huh.
This chick?
This woman's face off my Facebook. I was like, okay, all right. So then next time around, I can test something different. So whether that's a new audience, whether that's a different way of wording things, whether that's a different image, but making sure that you're only testing one thing at a time. Because if you test more than one thing, you don't know what produced the result.
Yeah. And then so how long do you run your tests for? Like I run them for maybe like 2 days. I like split test and ad, and then we'll say, oh, okay, I'm getting much more engagement with this one, and I turn it off. How much time do you give?
I would I don't touch anything for 48 hours.
Yeah.
Because you can mess up the way it's optimizing things. Like it's still trying to create enough data to give it statistical significance so that it knows which one of these is going to perform better in the long run. So definitely wait at least 48 hours.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I have come to accept that you have just got to test everything, and you have to be okay with like not knowing what's going to work, which is really hard. But that's just how everybody does it. Nobody really knows, and they just have to test. I mean, I think
it's a really healthy mindset to get into for business. Is just approaching it like a scientist. Like if you run an experiment and it doesn't go the way you thought, like you don't cry and run away and never try anything again because you're a scientist. This is what you do. You run tests. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean you're a failure. Like it just didn't work the way you thought it would. So let's try something new.
Yeah. And it reminds me, I was in an exercise class the other day and the coach said, work towards failure. And it just stuck to me in my head because the whole idea being obviously when you do muscle failure, that's when you are building your muscle. But I thought, what an interesting concept for business, right? Work towards failure. We often are so worried about failing and not, we want to be successful, but like that value in failing is like split testing, right? Like you want to know what's going to fail because it's going to teach you hopefully what is going to work. So
yeah. And even in my business, when I've had things that completely bomb, there's a choice. You can decide to take it personally and pretend it never happened and bury it. Or you can dig in and say, all right, that didn't work. But what can I learn from this? What did I do that maybe I can do a little bit differently next time? And sometimes they're very small changes.
Yeah. So you just have that patience. You have to have that patience to figure it out and not take it so personally. Like, nobody wants to see my face on a Facebook ad.
I laughed when I saw that.
But hey, it worked. It makes sense. It's so true. Like, and if you think about it from, again, the user perspective, when I look at what's being marketed to me, I pay attention. I'm like, why did this ad grab my attention? Like, what, like, I just dissect it. And, sometimes I take screen grabs of it. Because I'm like, what was it about this ad that just caught my attention as I'm like going through the scroll, and why certain ads I just don't pay attention to at all. And just being aware at that level, I think is also can give you a lot of insight.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That awareness and that ability to say, hang on, what about this can I take? Not saying copy them, but saying model them. What is it about maybe the image, maybe the way they worded things?
Yeah. Girl, I feel like we can talk forever. I feel like there's more to come. Do you have anything that you really just want to share, like in terms of a tip before we round it out? Because we've been at this for a while now that I'm looking at the clock.
I would say trying to map out your customer journey and knowing that things are going to change. And you made a good point about that dance studio and how they've been around forever and they have their system down. And they got there by testing and failing and seeing what didn't work. And that's not the end of the world. That's actually a great way to make progress. So keeping that in mind with your marketing, if you put something out there, it doesn't work. Okay, but why? Why didn't it work? What can you change next time around so that you can improve upon it, because that's what it's all about. I honestly think that entrepreneurship is like the ultimate self-improvement course.
Girl, it's like therapy.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh, all your issues you ever had, they're coming up.
Like when I was 6 years old, like, in first grade, that thing happened. It's like bubbling up. It really is. I don't know what it is, because you're putting yourself out there and it's scary. It's scary.
But keeping in mind, I think you can look at it as good or bad, but there is no secret formula that, some people have and that you don't. The secret formula is paying attention to your specific people, mapping out what their customer journey is and speaking to them in the way that they respond to. So don't feel like, it's this frustration of not having this thing that you need to have. Like, it's just a discovery process and it takes time. So try not to judge yourself too hard on it.
So that leads me into the final question, which is, I ask you to fill in the blank. The one thing I know for sure is...
It's going to sound like kind of a nihilist thing to say, but it's that nothing is for sure.
Girl.
And just as we're talking about this, it's like, that's it.
Yeah. And you got to just be comfortable with that gray.
Yeah.
And the unknown.
The only way you get clarity is by trying.
Ooh, is that your one thing?
Yeah.
I like that one. Yeah, that's a total, hashtag. Or tweetable or whatever.
If you try, it works. It doesn't work, but at least you know something.
That is true. Well, Heidi, thank you so much. I feel like we could keep talking and talking and talking, which is a great thing. So maybe we'll have to have you back on again for part 2.
I'd love that.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
So there you go. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I know we went on a few different tangents, but hopefully you got a lot of value out of it. If you want to learn more about Heidi and connect with her, you can get all of her links over in the show notes at AnnetteStepanian.com/podcast/16. Heidi is also a fellow podcaster, so you can find her podcast in iTunes, and it's called the Evolve Your Wedding Business Podcast. So make sure to look for her and subscribe to her show. And if you want to hang out with us in a webinar coming up in the next week or so, then head on over to the show notes and make sure to save your spot for our upcoming webinar. With that said, I hope you have an amazing day, and I can't wait to talk to you later.